Trigger warning for this episode: casteism at around 16 minutes.
I always tell people I'm in business to be put out of business.
In India itself, I wasn't even aware of that there are sensitivity retails.
I'm not indigenous, but I know a bunch of people who are. I can pass you along.
First thing you need to do, talk to your players.
Yes, and that was so offensive to somebody. Yes.
See, I was watching a lot of Django Unchained.
I have a werewolf character, and she's a South Asian cowgirl, but she's also a werewolf panther shifter.
I and many other people would call it a literary hug.
Hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Infinite Tavern podcast. We are your humble and favorite hosts. I am Amaan HK, and with me is the other, the second favorite co-host.
Sure, drinking soup here is, well, your actual favorite host, Raghav or Anorak. You'll get the soup reference later on.
Yeah, the soup reference is to a recent recording or actual play that we did, which is going to be coming out soon.
Very soon.
But very soon, inshallah.
Assuming Purna finishes editing the recording.
Purna, get on with it. Come on, dude. She's going to put us on blast for this. So sorry, Purna, we love you, but yeah, we are hoping to get this on track. Keeping
I
that
didn't do anything. I was just here.
keeping that mini campaign aside,
If there are no more episodes uploaded, you know what happened to us.
you know who to find. Keeping that mini campaign aside, we have a very special guest with us tonight, and they are a performer, streamer, and they also run into a consulting situation. I'm so sorry, I'm fucking up this
That's okay.
so
I
bad.
got you. No,
Please,
you're good. You're good. It's a
Leona,
lot.
please take over. Take the wheel.
Absolutely, no problem. Hello, my name is Leona. You can find me all over the internet at the Leona Maple. Yeah, as was mentioned, I do stream. I do actual plays. I do tabletop RPG stuff. I do video game stuff. And I think the big thing that a lot of people know me for is for the fact that I am an intersectionality consultant. I talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. I specialize in helping video games and tabletop RPGs with that, and it's a lot of fun. You know, it's as we were saying before we started recording, not a thing that a lot of people do, but it was something that I wanted to do because I just got tired of seeing weird things. Like I saw a D&D supplement. This is actually how I got started. I saw this
Okay.
D&D supplement that was like D&D in India, and there was like mandalas on the cover and elephants, and I think there might have been yoga poses, and I was like, "Ye kaun si bakwas hai bhai?" You know, like I saw it, and I was like, I don't even know. Like I've tried Googling it and I haven't found it since. I don't know what it was that I saw, but I saw something on Twitter and it pissed me off so much I made a business out of it.
Oh God, I have so much to talk about at this point. Aman, you know
I
what I'm
know,
talking
me
Oh, yes.
too. Yeah,
know what I'm
I
talking
know
about.
exactly. Yeah, obviously I know what you're talking about because, again, before we get into that, I mean, talking about the work you do in India itself, I wasn't even aware of, that there are sensitivity readers or there are sensitivity consultants or DI consultants for
Yeah.
RPGs because that just to me personally didn't exactly feel like a foreign concept, but it just seemed to me like a new concept. Like, oh, this can happen. You just don't need to rely on, just you writing and,
Yeah.
inevitably, you know, putting something there of your own biases, which can be, can be wrongly informed, as a lot of
Yeah.
them are.
I was just gonna say it's been a thing for a while in like the book publishing industry, because like a lot of authors will write books with different characters from different backgrounds, and obviously you can't Google all of it. But I think it is a thing that has also existed for a while in the tabletop space, but it's not as common or as formal. I think recently there's been a lot more like I really push to like educate people and be like, hey, this is a thing that you could do, and it definitely doesn't exist in the video game space, right? So it's definitely a thing where I think a bunch of us kind of showed up on the scene around the same time and we're like, hey, did you know that you can actually do this? Like, you don't have to make, you know, D&D supplements about India that are completely inaccurate, or make board games with Indian people that are, you know, never Googled the words Meenakshi Temple board game. You'll be so upset. Don't do it. Don't do it.
You tell me
I
not to
was
do
so
it.
mad.
You tell me not to do it. I'm definitely going to do it.
I'm just doing it.
Please just do it and you'll be so upset. It's great. But you know, like, these things exist and they consistently keep happening. And that was, like I said, that was how I started, because I was just like, there's got to be a better way. And someone had told me about the concept of like sensitivity reading and sensitivity consulting, and like the fact that you can consult on, you know, being a cultural consultant, even like consulting on your culture. And I was like, well, that makes so much sense. Like, so much of tabletop RPGs is about different cultures and like pulling inspiration from different places. Like, D&D itself has gods from multiple pantheons, from multiple religions. So why not have someone that you can talk to about this stuff to kind of help make sense of it, you know? Especially when you start to like mishmash ideas together. And that was kind of the whole thing, was I was just like, this just feels like it's going to help people. That's all it is. I'm just here to help.
So, how did you get into D&D though? Or all any other
Or
TTRPG
Ooh,
TTRPGs, yeah.
in general? How did you get into?
yeah. So I had met someone online who was streaming on Twitch and like with a channel, and like they were you know, they're like, oh yeah, we play D&D, and I was like, oh my god, that's so cool. I've heard of D&D, but I don't know much about it. And I just started watching Twitch streams of people playing D&D and like tabletop RPGs, and like that was my first introduction to Twitch itself, and it was my first introduction to D&D, and like the whole world just opened up from there, you know? And like I was like, okay, well, now I have a Twitch account, now I have a Discord account, now I'm joining communities, you know, now I'm learning D&D, you know, like it all kind of happened just very, very simultaneously like that, you know? Just because it was so magical, like the idea of collaborative storytelling, and like especially the idea of like collaborative storytelling that an audience is also invested in, like they also want to know what's going to happen next, was really cool. It wasn't just about you and your table, it was also about the wider community, and that part for some reason just like was so infectious. And yeah, and that's how I got started, and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Yeah, and I was just a hobbyist for a bit, for a year or two, and then I kind of saw the industry and was just kind of like, what if I just offered this as a service, you know? Didn't think I was going to make a business. I was just going to offer it as a service, and then it turned into a whole business, and now I'm here 4 or 5 years later, and it's amazing.
So,
Yeah, Maple Intersectionality Consulting.
Yes.
Your business is called, right? That's awesome.
so I'm just curious. So, what exactly does a sensitivity consultant do in respect to TTRPGs or anything? So, what is the process?
Yeah. So, yeah, absolutely. So a lot of times, a lot of my questions, like, for example, Pathfinder has sourced things from, you know, Hindu mythology before, right?
Yeah.
Or, you know, let's say you want to make a character that's inspired by South Asian culture, right? You have a lot of those things. And there's also the aspect in D&D of like fantasy racism, right? Obviously, we've seen one D&D and we've seen all these other attempts to kind of adjust that. But prior to that happening, you were kind of just working with 5e and kind of the built-in things like that. One other thing I should notice that I did my degree in communications at Simon Fraser University, and so one of the things that I looked at in the course of my focus on media and culture was things like race and racism and depictions within the media. So for me, when I looked at D&D, it was very easy for me to see the fantasy racism, because I had, you know, an educational background in this kind of stuff, and I was like, oh yeah, that's that trope, that's that trope, that's that trope, and I kind of knew how to unpack it already. But it really is about that kind of stuff. Like, how do you avoid pitfalls? How can you make a more inclusive table? It can be something as simple as like a stream that's dealing with a sensitive topic, and I've like helped people that are like getting ready for their penultimate episode where they're going to confront a slaver, you know, and there's a
Yeah.
slavery theme to their game, and like, you know, there are Black people at that table, and how do you handle that in a way, like people that just wanted assistance making sure that they were going to handle that comfortably. Or if you're writing your own tabletop RPG and you're wanting more information about like, well, what is this and where did this come from? Like, I'm struggling to remember examples right now, but like a South Asian inspired monkey race, you know, and I can tell you about that, and I can be like, well, this is what we have in mythology, this is how this has been twisted, here's some source information. here's what I think would make a really cool and also respectful depiction versus something that maybe isn't, you know?
Yeah.
So a lot of times people kind of like want to know how to make things that are actually respectful and not disrespectful. Lots of little details like that, you know? So it really, every project that I get is a little bit different because no question is a bad question. And like, you know, people come to me with different needs. But yeah, I kind of run the spectrum of like, sometimes I'm talking to DMs, sometimes I'm talking to players, sometimes I'm talking to people that are running games, sometimes playing games, sometimes creating games, right? And you can kind of come to me at any phase in the process. Are you in your conceptual phase? Cool, let's talk about your concepts. Have you written it all out and you want me to double check like certain sections? Great, let's do that too, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, the sooner you start talking to me, the easier it is for me to help you course correct. Whereas, like, if you're like, you're the last thing before where you hit publish, you know, I can only do so much if your entire concept is terrible, right? But for the most part, it's about trying to help people get original, fresh ideas across, things that are actually respectful to like South Asian culture, especially. Um, and just like, yeah, making sure that people feel good about the work that they're putting out there. They don't want, like, a lot of times we've seen this happen before. People put out something and then there's a lot of controversy around it because there's something offensive in there. People don't want to do that. And why would they? They
Yeah.
are making innocent mistakes most of the time. Like, it's well-intentioned things that just aren't landing properly. And so a lot of folks that work with me find that like they're like, oh, you caught that thing that I would never have caught in a million years. That's okay. These things happen. I know it's not. The majority of these people aren't trying to be offensive. These things just kind of happen because you don't know any better. Um, so yeah, at the end of the day, I'm just here to make products better, to make your whatever it is that you're doing better, make it more inclusive, make it more fun, make you have a better time with it. You know, it's exciting. I like supporting
Yeah.
all of these creative people. It's great.
Pathfinder recently put out a setting called Tianxia. I think that's how it's pronounced. Like I
I
might be
think so.
butchering it. And I think all the writers, because it is supposed to be like a South Asian or East Asian kind of setting, or not
Hmm.
Southeast Asian, but East Asian or South Asian kind of setting.
Yeah.
Uh,
Hmm.
it did specifically took a lot of writers with those backgrounds, so that even at the first stage when they are writing, they are themselves like better informed
Yeah.
from the get go. Even though
That's
I think
yes, and that's the
I'm
ideal.
sure I'm sure they had consultants, consultants, sensitivity consultants on that. But it was so good to see. I haven't still
Yes.
read through all of it, but from what I've seen, it looks
Hmm.
really nice. And I'm
Yeah.
like glad that
Um,
Paizo is taking that step actively.
yeah. Deva Bhumi was on Kickstarter recently, and that was made by a South Asian person, and like that,
Hmm.
I backed that one immediately. It's been so nice to see like the South Asians in the community like getting the opportunities and like, you know, the not racist depictions. It's just so refreshing. But yeah, I that's the ideal, right? The ideal is, I always tell people I'm in business to be put out of business. If we live in a world where South Asian people are getting hired to be creative about these things and you don't need me, I've won. I will retire happily. You know? I would rather be broke with no money because the world is a better place because the actual people that need to tell these stories will be telling them, you know? That's the best. But until we get to that point, I'm like that bridge in the middle, you know, like when you need that expertise or you need that other perspective, I'm here. Right. But I was so happy to see that there were like South Asian writers on that project because that is the goal, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there was this one, we had these guests previously from
Yeah.
Indie and D.
Hmm.
So they
Hmm.
actually started creating a whole D&D setting based on Indian mythology. They were not using the elements, like exact elements from Indian mythology, but they were using them to create
Right.
their own gods,
They
create their
were
own history, and all
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, they were using like parts of history, like for example the Maurya Empire, or all of these
Mm-hmm.
places, like what was prevalent then, what do we know of those times, and the people living then, what were the politics, what was going on, what was the type of worship and system going on, and based on that, that's the important word, based on that, they were creating new
Yeah.
empires which could be inspired by it. And even with gods, not just like, okay, this is like a one to one of Ganesha, for example. It's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that. It's
Because you don't
inspired
necessarily
by,
need.
yeah, exactly. But inspired by Ganesha's teachings or their powers or
Mhm.
their influence, they can go into a direction and maybe create another god, which people then can
Yeah.
sort of find connections in that. And personally,
Yeah.
we love that sort of
Oh, that's awesome.
Listeners, listen to that episode. Also, you could check out
yeah,
D&D on Instagram.
Yes.
their playtest material
Okay.
is out on at indie ND, which people can go and check out. And while we were on the subject of indie ND, while I was actually researching for
Mhm.
campaign settings and things like that, South Asian setting where I can play it instead of just homebrewing it, because let's face it,
Yeah.
Raghav and I and lots of others, we have just homebrewed stuff, like to
Yeah.
be close to
Because
home.
that's the only way.
Yeah. So we found
Or so far
some
was the only way.
material. We found some
Uh-oh.
material. We're not going to name them because I don't want to give them that satisfaction.
Yes.
No.
Uh,
Oh, I'm so
there was
worried. What did you
there's
find?
there was an OSR campaign
Oh
setting
God.
based on
Uh-huh.
literal Indian mythology, uh,
Uh-oh.
and and written entirely by a white person.
Oh
And
no.
And also,
Oh
and
that
no.
person from what I've known, is a gatekeeper, like, to
yeah,
Oh
use the term.
no. Oh no. Oh, you've
and
prepared something very special for me, haven't you? Okay.
yes, and there was literal, like, I feel revolted just speaking about it, but there was a
I'm so scared.
cast as a mechanic in it.
Oh
Oh
no.
God, that is
Oh
You know, even
no.
saying it, I feel like puking.
Oh,
the
the number of times I've had to tell people, "Oh, caste system? No, stop!"
the
Like
caste system.
instantly,
The
Dad.
caste system was literally used as a mechanic over there, and the worst
Oh my
part
god,
of it. Oh God.
no.
Some trigger warnings. Listeners, again. Okay,
Yeah.
the worst
Oh,
part
we'll
of
put trigger warnings.
yeah,
Yeah.
the worst part of it was he put in a caste called the Untouchables,
No,
and
no.
ba-
I believe it, but oh my god, no.
and basically whoever was from that particular caste had to go through some purification ceremony, is what he said.
Okay, I'm going to war. That's it. Goodbye. No, oh my god, no. These types of people are the people that give me a job, okay?
No, it hurts me so much because my grandfather writes, like mythology books, and it just hurts me to see that.
I grew up reading Amma Chitra Katha. What the fuck is
Yeah.
this? Like,
Yeah.
literally, are yaar.
I shared it with Raghav without even thinking, and then I started reading it after I shared it, and I'm like, bro, w- that can't be right. A normal human being can't write
It
this.
is. But okay, so getting back into it, it is because that happens a lot. It happens a lot, and it doesn't just happen with South Asian culture. It happens with all cultures. That's the problem, right? Like that is a. It is now being resolved. Like I've seen companies putting out the effort to fix these things. Werewolf Fifth Edition by World of Darkness, for example, does a lot to fix a lot of the indigenous and Native American types of racism, the horrible blender that they did with a bunch of that stuff. It was bad, you know? And I was blessed to work on that. But yeah, no, it happens a lot, you know? And it's nice that we're now in an era where we can kind of correct those things, but also encourage people from those cultures to just create. One of my
Yeah.
favorite projects that I ever worked on was a book that was written by someone who is Indian. Sheldon Carter is his name, and it's called To Steal the Sun. What a great novel! It was a page turner. I could not put it down because it was a South Asian person writing South Asian inspired mythology in a complete South Asian fantasy land. When do you ever get to see that? It was so good. It was so refreshing because I'd never experienced anything like it. Um, and I just live for
Uh,
that stuff. Like the fact that like I got to work on that project, incredible, you know?
Another book that I read recently
Uh-oh.
is by an author called a good thing.
Okay,
Is by
okay.
an author called
I was like, how many of these torture pieces did you prepare for me? I love it. I love when people
uh
bring this stuff to me because they know that I'm
yeah.
going to get upset. Like they'll show me the box of a board game and I'll just be like, it's so bad, guys. It's so bad.
Hello, everybody. Has this ever happened to you? Man, with this new age of peace, where are all the adventurers? I sure wish I could have someone to clear all the rats out of my basement, but these damn guys are too busy with like big interplanar stuff. Well, don't you worry. We at Jobbers Industries are here to fill that gap. I can't pay those big fancy adventure prices. Well, not to worry. We at Jobbers Industries have you covered with some slightly less than top of the line adventurers, available at a reasonable, moderate price. Remember, at Jobbers, we're the best of what's left.
Jobbers Inc. is not to be associated with Damned or their affiliates at risk of litigational measures, but you can listen to the adventures of their contractors on your podcatcher of choice under the Ages of Damned title. Contractors who attempt to associate themselves as Damned members can and will be held liable for their actions. Contractors releases bi-weekly every other Friday.
Yeah, so another author that I recently read and I really liked is her name is Shannon Chakravarti, American Muslim, and she
Okay.
wrote a series of novels, which is fantasy, but like a historical fantasy, but with a Muslim twist. The Adventures of Amina al-Shirafi.
Okay, yes.
In this, like the lead character, she is a retired sailor pirate, and at one point she literally, blasts a demon away by reciting the Ayatul Kursi from the Quran. And while reading that, I was like, "Oh my heart! Oh, like
Yes.
I felt so seen in that moment." Like a
So
fantastical
good.
situation, and like something that I could relate to. And like, holy shit,
Yes.
I need more of this, because most of the fantasy that
I
we
have
read is
goosebumps.
most of the fantasy that we read tends to be more European in nature.
Yes.
Only
Mhm.
recently have we
Yep.
seen more uh, more, I would say, representation in a way which makes us feel a bit more seen. Like, for example, even
Mhm.
though like I love Sanderson, even with like things like Mistborn and things like the Stormlight Archive. While reading those characters, I don't know, like it might be my biases, like I might have to recheck my biases, but because Sanderson is a white person, I immediately my focus was shifting to like, oh, this person is the lead character who's speaking is white, even though Sanderson explicitly states that like the Alethi in the Stormlight Archive aren't white. But I
Yes.
don't know,
That there
it's just a,
that's a phenomenon.
yeah,
Yep.
like
No,
it's
I
just,
get it. I get it completely.
yeah.
It is twofold. It is twofold in the sense of one, we as South Asian people are so used to the white voice that it is hard for us to deprogram ourselves, right? We inherently
Hmm.
assume that it is white because of that, right? And that is common for most readers across the world because you are not prepared for a perspective from a protagonist or a character who is not white. It is a thing. So when I work on novels, I do tend to be like, hey, authors, like, you need to remind your audience. You don't have to put it, like, you don't have to smack them with it constantly, but you do have to remind them that this is a very different culture perspective from what they're used to.
Hmm.
So that is the first half of it. The other half of it is because Sanderson is white, it is harder for him to make it authentically POC, right? That's just inherently a
Hmm.
part of it. Like, he is going to do the best effort that he can,
Yeah.
but if he had no one else in the room with him when he was creating this, it's not going to come across that way. It's just not, right? It rings hollow, and you aren't able to like suspend your disbelief and feel that this is a POC talking. And that's true,
Yeah.
right? That is part of what I do for authors. It's like, no, let's make sure that this feels authentic so that people aren't distracted from the narrative, right? Like I watch like Never Have I Ever and I'm just like, I can't. This is tailored for a white audience. But then I watch Ms. Marvel and I forget the world exists, you know? Like that is so brown and it's so real that I forget, you know? I just start sobbing because it's so beautiful. And it just rings true. But that is a thing that happens, right? Where if we cannot hear it, if we cannot see it, or if there's some little detail that we're just like, that doesn't quite feel authentic, we immediately are shifted out of like that suspension of disbelief, and we go, no, this is a white kind of sounding character, right? So that both of those things are true. Both of those things play into that, and that is why like you could not hear it and believe it when you were reading those books.
Also,
Yeah,
speaking of books, I just want to bring out like this absolute gem of a book called House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. If you've heard of it.
I haven't. Is it
So,
good or bad? Now I'm
the
nervous.
book
it's good. It's
is
good.
I and many other people would call it a literary hug. That's how the book feels.
Aww. Okay,
So
well, I
the
have to read
TJ
that now.
Klune
See,
is
there are two types of people who talk to me. They're like, have you heard of this because it's bad, or have you heard of this because it's amazing? So I'm glad it's amazing.
oh,
Please go on.
seriously, that writer the writer is known for doing a lot of queer inclusive material,
Yes.
and this book just is like the most beautiful wholesome book I've ever read.
I
I'm
have to
currently
buy
Yeah.
reading its
it.
sequel, and it's beautiful, absolutely worth it.
Yeah. To See the Sun by Sheldon Carter was one of those moments for me, and it's also queer, so I do also recommend that one. But I will look up this book too, because now I need both on my bookshelf.
House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune, and there's the sequel, Somewhere Beyond the Sea
Awesome.
by TJ Klune.
While we do talk about TTRPGs a lot, we're just talking about books, TV series, and
Yeah.
movies. I was so happy because at for one series, which was the Wheel of Time, because like I am the biggest Wheel of Time nerd, and when the series was coming out, uh, again while reading it, because Robert Jordan, again, like we just talked about white voice, and like uh, us imagining all these characters as all these lead characters as white, essentially.
Yeah.
And but when the show was being cast, you had all kinds of people from so the indigenous
Yeah.
people from Australia, in I think New
Hmm.
Zealand, and you know even Alana, who is an Aes Sedai. I'm forgetting the actress's name. She's Indian, and I was
Mm.
seeing this plethora of basically a spectrum of colors across.
Yeah.
Wheel of Time as a book, when people read it, they were like, oh, this person is white, this person has golden hair, this person has
Yeah.
blue eyes, so obviously a white, like a person who's Caucasian. And there was such a backlash because of the casting.
The same
But
with
when the series
Rings
came
of
out,
Power as well.
yeah, exactly, for Rings of Power, I think it was even worse, because it's Lord of the Rings.
Yeah,
Lord of the
exactly,
Rings
because
is like the pinnacle of fantasy.
they they were pissed off because they cast African Americans as elves and everything, and they people were on about how elves are fair and long hair and all that.
Yeah, because there's a lot of bioessentialism, right? And let's remember, Lord of the Rings is one of the things that actually is one of the base inspirations for D&D and games like that, right? So that bioessentialism carries, and that's why it also carries into the tabletop RPG sphere.
Hmm.
But you'll find that a lot in these nerd communities, is that there's a lot of these types of narratives and logic, and they're not good ones. They're really not. But yeah, that doesn't surprise me one bit, because it comes up pretty regularly. And a lot of people get upset. They're like, well, why are you adding color for the sake of adding color? But it's a really cool reimagining. You don't always have to justify it. I enjoyed season 2 of Bridgerton, because I was like, sure, this is a complete fantasy, but it's so beautiful to see, and it's very affirming. But yeah, it's important, and it's important that we keep pushing back against that, like, bioessentials. Well, they have to be fair, they have to be white, because if you talk to some of those people, they will go really deep far down that path of why and how and explaining it, and it's not good.
Our previous guest Tejas also talked about how D&D inherently used bioessentialism. Dwarves get an automatic plus ability modifier to Constitution, or whatever it is, and he's a co-creator of a system called Bludgeon, which tries to solve
Yeah.
for that.
Hmm.
And it's like, well, what if that person was just a bit sickly, or what
Right.
if
Yeah, if there was a disability involved or a chronic illness or something, yeah.
Yeah, like people comes in all shapes and sizes, literally, and all kinds.
Yeah.
So why that specific beholden to like, okay, if you're this race and this class, this is what you will automatically get.
Can you imagine how boring society would be if we lived by D&D standards? Oh, all dwarves are all healthy and stout. Well, how much variety can you have in there? Do you know, like, do you ever stop and think about how insane that would be? Like, can you imagine, oh, all Indians are this one thing? We'd look like bloody cookie cutters. You know, like, it would be so
This whole
bad.
thing reminds me of this one quote from Captain Holt. If you know
Yeah.
what I mean. He just says, every
Brooklyn.
time someone says who they are, the world becomes a more interesting place. He says that.
Yes. Ah,
Okay, I have to rewatch Brooklyn Nine-Nine now.
I am rewatching it for the seventh time now. I mean, the first,
Like
nice.
the writers did such a good job with Brooklyn
They
Nine-Nine,
did.
honestly.
They did.
Uh,
And it's true, right? No, we say this a lot. No culture is a monolith. So
mhm.
yeah, it's true. You are going to have, even within dwarven society, elven society, like it doesn't matter what you're talking about in D&D or in reality, there are all kinds of people of all shapes and sizes and needs and capabilities, right? Like it's not, we're not all made on a factory line. We all have many different things that make us. So yeah, I completely agree.
even in my current the world that I created, right, Axel Dawn. For I have different names for the pantheons, same gods, but known by different names in different areas. It's kind of
Yeah.
like the same
Nice.
for even in the current world, right? Like if you look at
Yeah.
Roman and Greek, they are the same gods
Yeah.
but known
Yeah.
by different names.
Even like
Like,
in Hinduism, like depending on
yeah.
where you are in India or in the diaspora, we have different names for the same thing. Diwali is called different things in different places. Like, that's very common. That's
Festivals are
very normal.
celebrated differently.
Yeah, you can't even go 2 blocks without it being celebrated differently.
Leona Neelam.
Yes,
Uh,
yes.
what about someone who is just up and coming, like game designer, trying to make their
Hmm.
games? Maybe they can't afford
Yeah.
a sensitivity consultant. So,
Hmm.
what would a person or a game designer or a DM or somebody who wants to do an action play, what can they do about it if
Yeah.
they're trying to?
Well, I always tell people, like, come talk to me anyways, right? Like,
Mhm.
you don't, a lot of sensitivity readers, especially the ones that I work with, we tend to have sliding scale. We get it, right? Like, if you're just one
Mhm.
person trying to create a project, you're not going to have that much money, right? Like, we have corporate rates and we also have sliding scale, a lot of us, right?
Mhm.
Because at the end of the day, for us, it is about helping people. It's not really like the money is an important aspect of it, especially when we're working with businesses, because that's compensation for our labor, for our wisdom, for
Yeah.
like the fact that we have to sit here sometimes behind a computer screen and go, oh my God, we have to do all of that. And then we have to be calm and present with a professional answer, right? Like all of that labor that isn't really like seen. And that's why we charge. But I always tell people, please just come talk to me. Like if you're looking for a sensitivity reader's second opinion, sure, I may not be able to like give you an in-depth consultation, but if
Yeah.
you just need a question answered, I'm more than happy to help, right? I'm always happy to point people to resources, to connections. Like, I always think like if you've heard of me, please just reach out. Like I'm not some unattainable thing. My email is there, my DMs are there. Like I always tell people, just come talk to me. Let's see what we can do. Or like, if someone comes to me and they're like, I'm looking for an Indigenous consultant. I'm not Indigenous, but I know a bunch of people who are. I can pass you along. Right? We have developed all of these like referral networks and resources and like places where you can find more information, right? Places that you can look up stuff. We're always happy to share. So that is my biggest thing for people is like, don't hesitate to reach out, just ask.
So how do you try not to make like any inclusive material be like forced, like make it seem more natural and organic than rather than just forcing it to people.
Like
You know
like
what?
Yeah.
tokenism almost.
That's Yeah, well, and yeah, and that happens a lot, right? And it's like it should feel natural, it should feel reasonable, right? And sometimes that just comes back to like how we envision things. Like, I always like, for example, if there's like a panel and a panel discussion, there are 5 panelists. If you just have the one person of color, that's a little bit tokenist, that's a little bit forced. But if you aim for
Mhm.
2 or more and you start looking for multiple panelists, chances are you're going to fill up your panel with more than 2 people of color because you'll inherently find really cool people that you want to be on that panel. That's no longer forced, that's just naturally happening, right? If you're creating a game, well, okay, let's pretend we're making a game together. What do we want that game to look like? Well, I know that I want my game to be inspired by Gujarati culture. Let's say I'm a white person, but my friend is Gujarati, and she was at Navratri, and I saw Navratri, and I thought it was really cool, and that's kind of my inspiration. And I want to create a society in my tabletop RPG based on what I saw at this event. Well, I, as a white person, I'm not the expert, but like maybe I can go talk to my friend and get some ideas from her. Maybe I can do some research on my own, and then maybe I can reach out to this other cultural consultant who's also Gujarati, get a couple ideas together, put it all together, and then send it back to them. Be like, here's this inspiration that I have based on what I saw and based on the research that I did. I created outfits based on what I saw. I did some research about like Hinduism and like how all of these gods and goddesses work, and here's what I've come up with. And you kind of take those bits and pieces and then you present it to that community. And if it resonates, then you've probably done a good job. If it doesn't, maybe there's some things that need to be tweaked, but that's not inherently forced. If you are looking at your game and you go, I don't know, man, I think it's I have this game and it involves putting Jenga blocks together, but there's no diversity and inclusion in these Jenga blocks. Then you're forcing it because it doesn't need to be there, right? And that's a key part of it. Is not every game needs to suddenly solve for all of the world's problems, right? If I create a game, it's inherently diverse and inclusive because it comes from my South Asian perspective, right? And I write about very South Asian problems in the games that I've written. Don't look at them. But you know, I'm a very bubbly person, and my game is very doom and gloom. It's very sad. But you know, so it really does depend. Like, what is it that you're trying to do? I think people who are just trying to solve for diversity and inclusion, if that is the approach that you're taking of this isn't inclusive enough and I need to fix it, you're inevitably going to force it. But when it comes from a place of I just want to do something that's kind of cool and like that is inspired by this and this and this, you're probably going to be okay.
One more thing to add to that is be open to a little bit of criticism as well. That's where you would start thriving.
That is why they pay me dollars, is because I criticize gently, right? But that is the thing, right? Is like if you're going to do this, you have to be prepared for feedback to happen, exactly. Right? Because you're not always going to land it. You know, a lot of my authors that I've worked with, you know, they do their research, they do their best, and Google is only going to give you so much, especially when it comes to South Asian culture, which is so intricate, right? So you're going to make mistakes, and that's okay, you know? And so I always let people, hey, you didn't quite hit the mark on this one. That's okay. Here's the solution. I got you, you know? And that's the nice part about like an actual sensitivity consultant versus like asking your friend, is that we have your back and we're going to help you get the answers. Whereas your friend is just going to be like, I don't know, man, it was all right, but the clothes weren't right. You know, like, what are you going to do with that, right? Whereas, like, we're here to actually help encourage you and help get you across the finish line.
Is there any particular reading or video essay, even though I'm skeptical of videos essays mostly, but you know, any readings or any research that people can look into when thinking of, oh, maybe there's something wrong with my game, I need to look into it, or maybe check in with myself. I'm talking about, you know, the personal thing.
And we all have very unique perspectives that are shaped by a lot of different factors. So they're shaped by our parents, they're shaped by our friends, they're shaped by the society we live in. Your perspective as someone living in India is very different from my perspective in Canada. And we have very different problems. You know, the natures of our problems and the very intersections of how they behave are very different, right? That's why I talk about intersectionality so much. And that's why that's in the name of my business, is because all of these things connect, but they connect differently, right? So what is a good solution for you is not going to be a good solution for me, and vice versa. We need unique solutions for every single individual. So first of all, it's about, well, what is a medium that works for you? And second of all, what is it going to take to put you in someone else's shoes, right? For some people, it's a TV. You know, I had tons of people come up to me after Ms. Marvel because they were like, oh, that's all this stuff that she's been talking about this whole time. And now I see it in this TV show and I believe it. You know, it was hard for them to believe me when I said it myself. And then they came back to me. So as that is, go ahead.
No, I totally believe that, because, you know, when your partner or your family, when they suggest something or your parents suggest something, you're like, I don't want to listen to you. But when your friend comes, like somebody who's out from an outside,
Yeah.
or a stranger comes and said, "Oh no, that's you should do that kind of thing," and you're like, "Huh, maybe you're right."
Yeah.
And then you come back to your
100%
parents
that.
or your family,
100%.
and they're like, "Hey, buddy, I just told you the same thing.
I
Why
said
did
that
you listen to
already.
me in the
My,
first place?"
my poor baby brother, this happens to him all the time where nobody believes him. And then he's like, I just said that, yeah. Poor guy. I love him so much. No, but that happens, right? And so it's about finding the medium that works for you. Is it a documentary? Is it a video essay? Is it a podcast? Is it
Mhm.
a book? Whatever it takes. But at the end of the day, I think what you are doing is building your empathy, right? If
Hmm.
you cannot put yourself in another person's shoes or understand that there are different ways of life around the world, how will you know, right? To check your biases. If you've never interacted with, a polyamorous demisexual person, which is me, you'll be like, well, what is that? How does that work? I'm monogamous. That must be so weird. Aren't you uncomfortable all the time? And then I would be like, no, actually. And here's why. But if you've never encountered that, it seems very foreign, right? I always say curate your feed. Go look for things on
Hmm.
social media that are outside your comfort zone. Go look for, like I've started watching Indonesian comedians. I know
Ooh.
nothing about Indonesia, but it's funny, like I'm and it's great. It's like Indonesia and like yeah, other places like that. Like curate your feed with things that are not normal. If most of your feed is white tabletop RPG people, start following black people, start following South Asian people, see what they're saying about tabletop RPGs. It's going to be uncomfortable because you're going to read it and you're going to be like, what are they talking about? That doesn't make sense. Like I've never thought of D&D that way. But don't argue with them. Just listen to them, right? If you need to do that through
Yeah.
books, through academic papers, do it. But I really do think a really easy way of doing it is curating your feed or just finding media in other worlds that is uncomfortable. If you watch a lot of K-dramas, try watching a telenovela from, Mexico. I know a lot more about Black culture because, I've sat and listened to my Black partner, to my Black friends, and I've listened to their stories. And it's helped me develop a stronger sense of empathy because at the end of the day, that is what you're doing. If you're like, why does this political thing matter? Shut up and listen. Maybe you'll actually learn something along the way. It sounds so simple and it sounds so
Yeah.
ridiculous, but that genuinely, I think just like curate your feed or don't be afraid to go outside your comfort zone. Look for that new documentary, that new book, that new music album, whatever it takes.
I mean, I'm so glad I got into TTRPG community because otherwise, I mean, personally, apart from just a general art community, the TTRPG community is so colorful and so rich.
Hmm.
I
Yeah,
haven't seen that
it is.
anywhere else.
Yeah.
I worked in advertisement in India and films in India, and it's a pretty much there isn't a lot of variation in human nature that you see
Yeah,
there.
I would believe that. Yeah, that sounds about right. Because it wasn't
Hmm.
always cool to be a geek, right? It wasn't always cool
Yeah.
to be a nerd, right? So there's a level of activism that kind of comes baked in. There's a level of artistry that comes baked in, and then you just get everybody's hands in there, and it's so cool. I love what people are doing. It's so nice to see like the artistry in this space and like the creativity, and it's yeah. There's so many channels I can't, and it's like who do I support? Who
Yeah, I
don't I
know.
support? Because it's doing amazing things, and it's really
So many
nice
things
to
to watch,
see.
so many things to listen, so many things to
Yeah.
read. And while we're doing so many things, can you just pick out a moment from your experiences with TTRPG which was your
Ooh.
favorite?
Oh no. I've been
You
so
can
lucky that I've had so many cool moments. I
you can pick your
think
two or three. That's fine.
oh my gosh. I was very proud of publishing my own game. That was really cool. I think a moment as a player that I loved was it's not quite Constantine, it's a whole other thing. Dresden Files. There we go. I was in a
Oh.
Dresden Files game. I was in a Dresden Files game, and I do this all the time. I make very South Asian characters because I want my diversity to be there. That's who I am. That's just what I'm gonna do.
Yeah.
And my storyteller for that game or my GM for that game embraced it and actively on her own independently started looking up South Asian mythology to involve in it. And so like there was like lemon and chili hanging from a doorway at one point, and we had like a little pixie character who I named Tamatar, and she was involved and she was eating the lemon and chili, and I was like, Tamatar, you're not supposed to do that, you know? Like that's to keep the evil spirits away. Because my character was, very mystical. And so she got to kind of deal with all of this magic, both Western and South Asian. And it was amazing. Um, I love that I get to do these things where I have these moments where I make these South Asian characters and then the GMs rise to the challenge. That's really
Oh, I
cool. I
love
love
that.
that. I love those storytelling moments. Yeah. So those are. I'll give you two. There you go. I love Tamatar a lot. I think about that character more often than y'all would think.
Immediately, that song comes to my head. Tamatar bade mazedar, which went viral recently.
Oh no, I didn't even mean to bring that up. This was well
But
before that. This was like a couple years
yeah,
ago. But no,
yeah,
I
but it's
have a lot of, like my characters all have names like Priya and Maya and like, they're very South Asian and it's fun. It's nice. I get to
mhm.
really see myself in my characters. And yeah, I'm currently playing a character named Neela in a series, which is, one letter off from my real name of Neelam, and that was very intentional, was because I really wanted to experience myself in a very magical context,
Nice.
but there's a lot
What?
of myself in that character.
Oh yeah, I had two characters in my campaign as well, like two Indian-based characters. So one
Oh yeah.
one was called Maya itself. She's a way of the thousand arms monk. The other one is my absolute favorite. Her name is Ruhi. So she's a sorcerer.
Does she do just regular sorcery magic, or does she do a little bit of desi jadoo every now and again?
A little bit of that.
I have a werewolf character, and she's a South Asian cowgirl, but she's also a werewolf panther shifter. But yeah, Neela is a character that I intentionally made her to be very close to me, because it just felt within the context of the game, it just made a lot of sense, and I was like, I want it to be me, but if I was in a fantasy world, and I want to experience a lot of these difficult topics that we knew we were going to encounter as myself, but magical. And it's been really cool. So I've been really enjoying. I really, really enjoy putting South Asian characters in my tabletop RPGs because I think the GMs rise to the challenge. I think it makes for some really cool moments.
One more question from my side is, what if somebody intends to become a sensitivity reader or a sensitivity consultant, whether it is for cultural purposes or whether
Mhm.
it is for accessibility purposes?
Yeah.
What should they look into, and how can they get started in it?
Much like everything else that I say, come talk to us. Come talk to me. Come talk to. I didn't even realize how many people it was that I've gotten started in this field because people come talk to me and I just tell them everything they need to know. But apparently, I've done it more than once. So please just come talk to me, and like we've got all the resources to get you set up, right? Whatever guidance you really need about it. Some people kind of ask me like, well, what kind of qualifications do I need? Nothing, just your lived experience. It helps if you have a degree of some sort that's related to this because it gives you like a framework that you can use to analyze and communicate your ideas. But at the end of the day, like I'm more than happy to like guide people so long as you have an eye for this stuff and you can feel like you can, confidently explain and help people come up with the solutions, you're probably good to go. So yeah, don't be shy. It is hard work, but it is very rewarding. I love what I do because like sure, I may not happen the most frequently, but I love what I do because it is so satisfying to see that final product or to like leave that phone call and like your customer's like, aha, like, oh my God, I didn't think about that. Like it's really, really rewarding in the end. And I'm really proud of some of the projects that I've worked on. Like when I see how they started out when they first came to me and how the finished product is, and it's like it's so nice. It's so, so nice. So yeah, as always, just come talk to us. Bring us your questions, regardless of what questions they are. We're happy to help and provide the resources.
In the language of, or in the sayings of quoting the Infinite Tavern, you can at Leona on
Yes.
Blue Sky. I
Oh.
specifically say
Yes.
Blue Sky because, like, fuck that other app.
Yeah.
No, I just wanted to say, if like for the listeners out there, particularly the DMs, like if you want to, be more inclusive or anything, first thing you need to do talk to your players. No
Yes,
one
yes,
knows
Mhm.
better.
yes,
No one knows
yes,
better. Talk to your players. Talk to
100%.
them about what you're going to include. Ask them if they're okay with it, and then go for it. That's your
Yep.
first step.
Yeah, players first. Don't even come talk to me. If you haven't talked to your players, I'm not any help to you. Because that's my first question. Did you talk to your players? What did they have to say? What are their opinions?
Neelam, if you would like to plug in your channels where people can find you and how to reach out to you exactly.
My pleasure. Yeah. Hello. My name is Leona Neelam Maple. I run Maple Intersectionality Consulting. You can find me all over the internet at the Leona Maple or the leonamaple.card.co. Blue Sky is currently the best place to find me. Follow me. Keep up with what on earth it is that I'm doing. I do also exist on Instagram, Twitter. The other good place to find me is Twitch because I do stream every now and again. And the leonamaple.card.co is my static website if you're just looking for like a one-page thing that has everything on it. But I highly recommend just reaching out to me on Blue Sky. Send me a message, send me an email. My email's right there too. And we can chat about whatever it is that you want to chat about of any size, shape, and nature. And I'm happy to do it.
Leona, thank you so much for agreeing to do this.
Oh yeah,
We
absolutely.
loved
This was
having
Thank
you
so
you
here.
guys.
And
so
actually,
Thank
much
you.
fun.
It's
like,
been a pleasure.
yeah, more than fun, it was like also educational as well for us
Oh yeah.
too.
Thanks.
Um,
I'm glad.
the-
That's always my goal is to educate people. So I'm happy that it was informative.
yeah, and like we look forward to talking to you again very soon.
Yes,
We'll
please.
keep in touch. Absolutely. So, until next time, everyone, thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. If you are listening on Spotify, please give us a good rating. That really helps us in building up the
And if you
algorithm
give us a good rating, you get an inspiration in my
and in
games.
point of inspiration and Raghav's game. And if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe, like, comment, do all that shenanigan, and please comment as well. And what did you think about the episode? And if you did not like or what we had to say, maybe we are not the right podcast for you. So, in the interest of time, I shall be closing this off and hoping that all your roles are great. That was an awkward pause for no reason at all.
Yeah, what was with the no, my question was
I
what was with the constipated voice?
I see. I was watching a lot of Django Unchained, so I immediately went to the intonations of how the doctor was speaking in a very German American voice, and I completely butchered it and and
Yeah,
it turned out to be constipated voice. Okay, this is what we're ending the podcast on. Like, I can't.
Aman's constipated
Okay.
voice.
No, oh my god. Okay, everyone. Bye. We'll see you in the next one.
Bye.